Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving deep today into, well, a really crucial corner of the material science world.
Uh-huh.
It kind of quietly holds so much of our modern life together. We're talking about the global octyl phenolic tackifying resin market.
Right. These are key ingredients, really high performance ones in specialized adhesives.
Exactly. The kind you find in, I don't know, car tires, durable labels, sealants, all sorts of things.
Yeah.
So our mission today is to sort of cut through the data you've shared, pull out the really key insights, give everyone a clear picture without getting, bogged down.
And the source material paints a picture of, well, pretty significant growth ahead.
Okay.
It shows a market valued around $280.5 million back in 2021.
Right.
And it's projected to nearly double, hitting something like $564.5 million by 2033.
Wow. So that's a 6% annual growth rate? Pretty steady.
Yeah, about 6%. Pretty solid, steady growth.
So here's where it gets interesting for me. What's actually fueling that? What's making this specific market tick?
Well, it really boils down to the growing need globally for adhesives and sealants that are reliable, really high performance.
Okay.
Key industries like construction, automotive manufacturing, the rubber industry, they're the big drivers here.
These aren't just any old glues then.
No, definitely not. These resins give specific properties. Think heat resistance, flexibility, durability, things you need in really challenging applications.
Right, like making sure your weatherproofing sealants actually work season after season.
Exactly. Or that pressure-sensitive adhesives, which are everywhere, perform reliably day in, day out.
And you mentioned tires, that bonding is absolutely critical there. Huge volume user, I imagine.
Absolutely huge. And it extends beyond that, too. Think about durable industrial tapes, labels, the kind used in really demanding sectors.
Like electronics,
Sure.
healthcare.
Precisely. Electronics, healthcare, logistics. They all need adhesives that just won't fail under stress or temperature changes or exposure. Performance is key.
Okay, so performance drives demand. Now, looking at where this is all happening geographically, the dynamics are quite striking in your sources.
Oh, they really are. Asia Pacific is, well, the undisputed leader in this market space.
Really? By how much?
It's projected to account for a massive chunk, potentially reaching $235.4 million by 2033.
And that's largely driven by the big industrial players there, China, India.
Exactly right. China and India, with their huge automotive sectors and just ongoing industrialization, they're the dominant forces.
Okay, who's next?
After Asia Pacific, you've got North America is the next largest market. The U.S. anchors that significantly.
Makes sense.
And Europe is also a major player. Countries like Germany, the UK, France, they contribute quite substantially.
And I saw mentions of Latin America, too. Places like Brazil, Colombia, Argentina showing some growth.
Yes, they're gaining traction, definitely, but maybe not quite at the same pace as Asia Pacific. And then the Middle East and Africa show, well, slower growth, around 1.6% CAGR, according to the sources.
So truly global, but with clear centers of gravity. Interesting.
Correct. But, despite this strong growth forecast,
Yeah.
your sources also point out some significant headwinds. It's not all smooth sailing.
Okay, what are the main hurdles? I immediately think environmental concerns with chemical production.
That's a big one. There are definitely growing concerns about the potential environmental and even health impacts of these traditional phenolic compounds.
Right.
And that ties directly into regulatory pressure, especially around VOC emissions, volatile organic compounds.
Oh, the stuff adhesives can release into the air.
Exactly. Regulators are pushing hard for lower emissions across the board.
And I bet raw material costs are a headache too, like octylphenol, formaldehyde.
Absolutely. A major point in the sources. The volatility in the price of those key raw materials. It adds significant cost pressure and, frankly, market uncertainty.
So you've got these combined pressures, regulatory, environmental, cost.
Yeah, and it's forcing the industry to innovate, to explore alternatives.
Okay, that leads us perfectly into the future then. How's the industry responding? What trends are shaping what comes next for these resins?
Innovation is really the name of the game. The market's definitely moving towards...
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai.
Innovation is really the name of the game. The market's definitely moving towards developing low VOC options and also low-free monomer resin grades.
Low-free monomer.
Why?
Why is that important?
That's particularly critical for sensitive applications. Think medical devices or maybe packaging for consumer electronics. Anywhere you need to minimize the risk of unreacted chemicals leaching out. It's about safety and compliance.
So cleaner, safer versions for specific uses. Got it. What about the high-performance needs, like in EVs or batteries?
That's another major trend, the rise of electric vehicles, advanced energy storage. These need adhesives that can handle serious heat and vibration.
Right.
So octylphenolic resins or formulations using them are actually crucial for making sure components in these demanding systems last. Long-term reliability is key.
And it sounds like they're not just using one type of resin anymore, mixing things up.
No, that's right. The sources show a clear trend towards creating hybrid systems.
Hybrid, meaning.
Meaning, formulators are blending these phenolic resins with other types of tackifiers. The goal is to create adhesive formulations with a more balanced set of properties, really tailored for highly specialized sectors.
Like aerospace. Or advanced medical stuff.
Exactly. Aerospace, high-end healthcare applications, places where the performance requirements are just incredibly stringent.
Okay. So let's try and wrap this up. What does this all really mean? This deep dive into your sources shows, well, a market with really robust growth potential.
Definitely. Driven fundamentally by these essential high-performance needs in huge global industries, automotive, construction, electronics.
But at the same time, it's a market that's clearly grappling with some big challenges.
Environmental scrutiny, regulatory demands pushing for cleaner chemistry, and just the practical economics of raw material costs.
And that pressure seems to be the engine driving innovation, right? Towards more specialized, safer, higher performing solutions.
Absolutely. It's pushing the boundaries.
So whether you're involved in manufacturing, maybe looking at investments, or even if you're just curious about the sort of hidden materials that make modern stuff work, this gives you a really powerful lens into a critical, even if it's often unseen, industry.
Yeah, it really does. And it raises, I think, an important question to maybe leave people with.
Go on.
As this push for sustainability gets stronger and the regulatory landscape keeps evolving, how quickly might these newer alternatives, the bio-based ones, the low VOC ones, how quickly might they actually start to reshape this market,
Yeah.
potentially challenging the dominance of the traditional octylphenolic tackifiers we've been talking about?
That is something to think about. How fast that shift could happen. Interesting. Okay, welcome to the deep dive. We've got, well, quite a stack of sources here today. And our mission really is to unpack the global optically active amines market.
Right.
Now, I know that sounds maybe a bit technical, a bit jargony.
It does a bit, yeah.
But stick with us because you'll
Yeah.
find these compounds are, well, they're becoming super important. Quietly, but definitely important across some major industries.
They really are. Think of them almost like high-precision building blocks, very specific tools.
Okay.
And our sources, they definitely show this market isn't just important now. It's actually set for some pretty explosive growth.
Explosive is definitely the word. I mean, one of the first things that just jumps right out of the data is the sheer scale of the projected expansion.
Yeah.
We're looking at a market that was, what, around $10.48 billion back in 2021?
Yep, that's the baseline figure.
And the forecasts push it all the way up to $26.4 billion by 2033. That's quite a jump.
It really is. More than doubling in, just over a decade.
So what does that work out to in terms of growth rate?
Well, it translates to a compound annual growth rate, or key AGR, of a very steady 8%, which signals, a significant pickup in how much they're being used.
And it seems like that use is really concentrated in some key areas. Our sources keep pointing to pharmaceuticals, obviously, but also agrochemicals.
Right, crop protection and things like that.
And then this more specialized world of chemical synthesis, specifically chiral and asymmetric synthesis.
Exactly, those are crucial. And the increasing use in developing new drugs, that's a huge driver for this fast growth.
Okay, maybe unpack that chiral bit for us a little. Why is that so important?
Sure. So basically, a lot of molecules that are active biologically, think drugs, pesticides, they exist in two forms that are mirror images of each other, like your left and right hand.
Okay, like hands. Got it.
They're called chiral molecules. And often, only one of those handed forms, one enantiomer, is the one that actually works, or maybe it's the only safe one.
Ah, I see. So the other hand might be useless or even harmful?
Potentially, yes. So optically active amines are absolutely key for selectively making just the one specific form you need, getting what's called an enantiopure product.
Okay, so optically active means they have that specific handedness built in.
Exactly.
And using them in chiral synthesis or asymmetric synthesis helps chemists build complex molecules with the correct hand.
That's the goal.
Needed for things like drugs to work well and be safe. And enantiopure APIs, those are the final drug ingredients that are purely the right hand.
You've got it. That's precisely why they're so vital, especially in pharma.
Right. That makes a lot more sense now. Thanks.
And our sources really dig into where this growth is actually happening geographically,
Hmm.
because the picture isn't the same everywhere. While the overall market's hitting that 8% CAGR towards the $26.4 billion.
Yeah.
Understanding the regional differences is really important.
Okay, so let's break it down. Where should we start? North America. The sources usually put it as the biggest chunk, right?
Yep. It remains the dominant force. The projection here is for the market to reach $10.32 billion by 2033.
Okay. Big number. And the growth.
Still strong,
Oh.
maintaining a 7.7% ZAGR.
And within North America, I assume the U.S. is the main driver.
Oh, absolutely. The data clearly points to the U.S. market hitting $7.13 billion of that $10.3 billion by 2033.
Okay.
That's with a 7.4% CAGR.
Yeah.
And it's pretty heavily influenced, as you'd expect, by the advanced pharmaceutical R&D happening there, plus the big chemical manufacturers.
Right, makes sense. But hang on, what's interesting here in the source, Canada's growth rate is actually shown as slightly higher. It says $8.647 billion,
Yeah.
bringing it to $2.47 billion. Did the sources give any clues why Canada might be outpacing the U.S. slightly just in this particular market?
They did, actually. They seem to link Canada's slightly faster growth to rising investments in life sciences specifically,
Oh, okay.
and also a growing demand for those really high-purity and anti-pure APIs we were just talking about.
So maybe a more focused push on those high-end ingredients.
It suggests that, yeah, sort of specialization maybe.
Interesting nuance. And Mexico, it's also playing a role.
Definitely contributing. Tied mostly to its fine chemical and agrochemical sectors, it's projected at about $715 million by 2033, with a 7.5% CAGR.
Okay, so North America, solid, established, growing steadily, mostly driven by pharma and chemicals.
Pretty much sums it up. Now, if we hop across the Atlantic to Europe,
Okay.
the market picture there looks, well, quite similar in terms of the overall pace. It's also set for good expansion,
The total figure.
reaching $7.69 billion by 2033 and growing at that same overall 7.7% CAGR, just like North America.
Huh. Interesting parity there. But I bet within Europe there are some standouts.
Absolutely. This is where those regional nuances really pop. The UK, for instance, stands out in the European data. Really impressive projected growth rate,
How impressive.
8.8% CAGR, driving its market up to $1.84 billion.
Wow. Okay, even higher than Canada's rate. And the sources connect that specifically.
Yes, explicitly to innovation in chiral drug manufacturing. That specific focus seems to be yielding results.
Specialization paying off again. What about Germany? Big chemical industry there?
Yep, Germany makes a very substantial contribution too. Expected to reach $1.38 billion by 2033.
And the growth rate.
A solid 8.2% CAGR, really supported by its, very strong and well-established chemical processing infrastructure.
Okay. And then we have the other major European economies.
Right. France looking at about $891 million, Italy at $485 million, Spain around $720 million, all by 2033.
And their growth, more in line with the regional average.
Yeah, pretty much. Their growth rates are sort of clustered between 6.9% and 7.5%. It reflects that steady industrial development and, increasing use in research and production across the continent.
Okay.
The sources also flag smaller contributors still growing, like Luxembourg hitting maybe $77 million, and the combined rest of Europe adding up to nearly $1.5 billion.
So Europe looks strong, steady, but with the UK showing particularly high momentum in specialized areas.
Exactly. Now, Asia Pacific. This is where things get really dynamic, according to the source material.
Dynamic how? Faster growth.
Much faster. The region isn't just expanding, it's characterized as undergoing rapid growth. It's forecasted to more than double in size,
Double.
reaching $5.94 billion by 2033, with a higher regional CAGR overall, 8.5%.
And who's leading the charge in APAC? China, I presume.
China's definitely the regional leader in terms of market size, projected to hit $2.41 billion by 2033.
And its growth rate.
Also swift, 8.9% CAGR, fueled mainly by its, booming pharmaceutical industry and its mass.
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai.
Fueled mainly by its, booming pharmaceutical industry and its massive chemical synthesis capabilities.
Right. But you said dynamic. Is there something else?
Yes. Here's where the sources reveal one of the sort of real global hotspots, India.
India. Okay.
It's projected to have the highest KGR globally among the major countries listed in these reports, an impressive 9.4%.
9.4%. Wow. What does that mean in dollar terms?
It means its market revenue is forecasted to nearly triple, from about $223 million to nearly $670 million by 2033.
Tripling. Okay, that is phenomenal growth. And the sources give a reason for that acceleration.
They do. It's directly attributed to India's emergence as a global hub for generic drug production.
Ah, that makes perfect sense. As generic manufacturing ramps up massively.
The demand for these precise building blocks just skyrockets with it.
Fascinating. That's a key takeaway right there. What about other parts of Asia?
We also see strong expansion elsewhere. Japan, for example, projected to reach $1.17 billion. South Korea looking at around $711 million. Australia, smaller but growing, about $287 million.
Okay.
And the Southeast Asian market, Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia, others, that cluster is also showing significant traction, reaching almost $250 million by 2033 with an 8.5% CAGR.
So Asia-Pacific is really a growth engine led by China's scale, but with India showing explosive potential, particularly linked to generics.
That's a great summary. Now let's head south to Latin America.
Okay. How's the picture there?
The sources describe this market as showing steady, consistent growth. Not quite the explosive rates of some parts of Asia, but solid.
Who's leading in Latin America? Brazil.
Brazil leads the region, yes. Projected to reach about $570 million by 2033, growing right around that global average, 8% CAGR.
When that's driven by?
Supported mainly by its significant agrochemical and pharmaceutical industries. Similar drivers as elsewhere, just maybe at a different scale.
Okay. And other countries in the region.
Yeah, we see others contributing too. Argentina, looking at about $251 million. Colombia, around $111 million. Peru and Chile showing maybe more modest growth, but still growing, reaching nearly $70 million on $141 million, respectively.
So generally positive momentum across the board there.
Yeah, the overall feeling from the sources is positive traction, tied to, increased regional investment in health sciences and crop protection. It mirrors some of the bigger global trends.
All right, one more region to cover. The Middle East and Africa. How do the sources frame this one?
They characterize it as, comparatively smaller in current market size.
Makes sense.
But, and this is key, one with really exciting high growth potential.
Okay, so another potential hotspot.
Potentially several. This region holds the other absolute standout growth rate, highlighted in the data. Remember, India's 9.4%?
Yeah.
South Africa is projected to have the absolute highest KGR globally mentioned anywhere in these sources, a stunning 10.8%.
10.8%. Get out. That's incredibly high for any market sector.
It really is. Its market is forecasted to grow substantially, from around $54 million in 2021 up to nearly $184 million by 2033.
Wow. And what's driving that surge in South Africa, according to the sources?
They link it to expanding pharmaceutical production capabilities locally and also growth in chemical processing.
Okay, so building up that industrial base seems to be key. Anyone else showing that kind of momentum in the region?
Nigeria also shows really strong momentum, projected to reach over $65 million by 2033 at a KGR of 10.2%, so also double-digit growth.
Another one.
And Egypt and Turkey are significant contributors too, forecasted to reach about $119 million and $175 million, respectively. And look at their CRs. 9.9% for Egypt, 9.7% for Turkey. Really impressive.
Almost double digits for them, too. This region is really accelerating, then.
It certainly looks like it. And then the rest of the Middle East portion adds another, say, $126 million by 2033, growing at a healthy 8%.
So yeah, while starting from a smaller base, parts of the Middle East and Africa are accelerating faster than almost anywhere else. That's another really surprising insight.
It is. And if we kind of step back now and try to connect all these regional pictures,
yeah, pull it all together.
The sources seem to point towards three main categories of drivers that are really propelling this global expansion across all these pretty diverse markets.
Okay, what are they?
They consistently mention technological innovation.
Right. Better ways to make these things, presumably.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then pharmaceutical advancement, new drugs, more demand for precision.
Makes sense.
And finally, regulatory shifts. Things like stricter purity requirements, maybe environmental regulations favoring cleaner synthesis routes.
And you can really see how those themes play out differently in the regions we just walked through, can't you?
Absolutely. The U.S. leading in pharma R&D, that clearly lines up with pharmaceutical advancement.
Yeah, and the UK's focus on chiral drug manufacturing innovation.
Textbook technological innovation.
And India becoming that generic drug hub. That feels like both pharma advancement and maybe regulatory shifts making it attractive.
Could well be a combination, yeah. And South Africa's expanding production base ties into both tech improvements and pharma expansion locally.
So it really feels like these optically active amines are sitting at a sweet spot,
Mhm.
benefiting from this convergence of factors, making them kind of central to these key growth industries.
That's a good way to put it. Their role as these precision building blocks, especially as the requirements, particularly in pharma, get stricter and stricter,
Yeah.
it just makes them indispensable as these industries mature and expand all over the world.
Okay, so let's try to synthesize the main takeaway from this deep dive into our source stack. What's the big picture?
Well, the global optically active amines market is clearly undergoing a huge transformation.
Mm-hmm.
Massive growth projected pretty much everywhere you look.
Right. But, and this is maybe the crucial part, that growth isn't uniform at all.
Not at all. You've got these very different dynamics playing out. The
Oh, yeah.
established, large, but maybe more steadily growing markets in North America and Europe,
Uh-huh.
contrasted with these high potential, really rapidly accelerating markets in places like India, South Africa, Nigeria, Turkey, parts of Asia Pacific, and Middle East Africa.
And the sources are pretty clear that this whole growth trajectory creates some significant opportunities, right?
Oh, definitely. Whether you're, chemical manufacturer actually making these
Well,
amines.
someone in drug development using them.
Exactly. Or maybe an investor looking specifically at specialty chemicals.
Or even just, someone trying to understand the fundamental building blocks of these huge industries like pharma and agrochemicals. There's opportunity there.
This whole picture, all this data we've sifted through, it really raises an important point for you, the listener, to think about.
Okay.
Given these widely varying growth rates we've seen, 7% here, nearly 11% there, and considering those drivers we talked about, like tech innovation and regulatory changes,
Yeah.
what specific innovations, maybe in synthesis methods, or what exact policy changes happening on the ground in places like India or South Africa?
Yeah.
What do you think are the real sparks, the specific things creating these particular hotspots of really explosive growth?
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai